Hey everyone, this is Evan from 20-Sided Night, and today we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite boomers, Epokasites. Epokasites can be found on page 36 of the Alien Archive 4. So first, I'm going to give a brief overview of their stats and their abilities, then we're going to go over their lore, and then we'll wrap up by talking about how you could add some to your game. Epokasites come in two varieties, Fixers and Runners, being CR 3 and 8 respectively. Fixers are considered to be tiny-sized Fae, as these pocket princes are about 1.5 feet tall. They have an HP of 28, an EAC and KAC of 14 and 15, a tech and an electricity resistance of 5. They have a move speed of 30 and a perfect fly speed of 60. And for their attacks, they can either use a knife or a bow. They're also able to cast Detect Tech, Detect Radiation, and hold Portal once per day. And they are able to cast Mending at will. For their abilities, they get Anachronistic Strike, Draining Aura, and Tech Resistance. Anachronistic Strike. Anachronistic Strike lets them attack with a weapon with the Archaic property without taking the standard damage penalties. Which, for those of you who don't know, an Archaic weapon is any weapon made out of pre-sci-fi material, and when attacking something with futuristic armor, you deal 5 less damage. Damage aside, they follow all the other rules regarding Archaic weapons, like not being able to be fired in hurricane force winds. Fun fact, that last bit isn't even in the section for Archaic weapons, it's in the rules for environmental conditions. Draining Aura. Draining Aura creates an aura that just generally fucks with technology by doubling the amount of charge it takes to use each item, decreases the DC that enemies have to make to avoid any effects that it creates, and increases the DC that the user would have to make to use it. Tech Resistance. Tech Resistance is a resistance to any damage from a technological source. The book says that this includes technological traps, most weapons, technomancer spells, and any natural attacks from creatures with a technological subtype. So the only way around this is to hit them with a non-technomancer spell. Or you could just pull a cane and beat them to death with a rock. However, the book states that this does not stack with their electrical resistance. Epokasite runners are medium-sized Fae. They have an HP of 95, an EAC of 19, and a KAC of 20. They also have a tech and an electricity resistance of 10. For some reason they lose their perfect flight speed, but still have their movement speed of 30. They're able to use clubs for melee attacks, and for ranged attacks, they have an Archaic Blaze Flame Pistol. Okay, small side tangent, but I feel like this is a weird choice of weapon for them to have because in the Blaze Flame Pistol's description, it says that it uses nanotechnology to break down the fuel into something more flammable, which, I don't know, it just doesn't seem very old-timey to me. Honestly, I would have just given them the hunting rifle from the core rulebook to better match their FUD aesthetic, and then just add a few d8s because of Fae magic, but that's just me. Tell me what you think in the comments. Anywho, onto their spells. They can cast Discharge once per day, and 3 times a day they can cast Caustic Conversion, Digital Shield, Holographic Image, Make Whole, and Manipulate Tech. And at will they can cast Identify, Incompetence, and Jolting Surge. They not only have the same abilities as Fixers, but they also have an ability called Regressing Glare. In short, what this does is it forces a technological or hybrid item within 30 feet to make a Fortitude saving throw. Just as a reminder, when an item makes a saving throw, you roll d20 and add that item's level as its bonus. But if that item is being worn or held, you can use that creature's bonus instead. However, if the item fails its roll, it's turned into an archaic version of itself, as seen in that bit from the last video.
Goddamn Epokasites turned my brand new phaser into some old-ass revolver.
Mechanically speaking, this gives the item the Archaic property, functions as if it had the broken condition. Any checks made to use it have a -2 penalty because, I don't know, because the software is the same but you're basically running it on Windows Vista now. And if the target was a piece of armor or a weapon and fails its check by 5 or more, it becomes something so antiquated that you lose any proficiency bonuses that you previously had for using that piece of equipment. One last thing to keep in mind is that an Epokasite can use this on large items, so they are fully capable of turning your Dragula into an 83 Raptor Roadster. So now let's talk about their background. Epokasites are Fey creatures, which means that they originate from the First World, aka Starfinder's Feywild. So I'm going to briefly go over what the First World is in Starfinder. So according to sources like the core rulebook, and oddly enough the section of the Starship Operations Manual that talks about alternate FTL options, the First World was the first draft for the universe, but then was largely abandoned by the gods for the standard material plane that we all know and love. The biggest differences are that there is no outer space, the land just kind of goes on forever. However, there are a lot of corresponding locations between the First World and the material plane. Also, time isn't always consistent, so like all good stories involving the wee folk, If you're not careful, you may be there for only a few minutes, but then come back to find out that your civilization has been dead for hundreds of years. Or, on the other hand, you may find that you exited 5 minutes before you left, which is why it's a valid FTL option. Like I have alluded to, Epokasites are fae that strongly identify with a specific culture and time period. They can become fixated on a specific culture and time period in 2 different ways. The first way is that they just instantly weeb out on the first culture they come across, or as the book says, an Epokasite most often imprints on the culture and time period in which they came into existence on the material plane. However, if for some reason the time period just doesn't do it for the Epokasite, they may kind of bum around until they stumble across a time period that they do like. Either way, they will eventually find themselves in a situation where the society they live in has started to move on without them. And at this point, they will start a campaign of returning to the good old days. They will do this by preserving old technology and sabotaging modern technology. And if ever caught, they will actually ask you for a reward or expect some sort of payment, because as they see it, they are helping you return to the way things should be. The book doesn't exactly say how they do this or if there are any ethical limits that they will cross, but since they're listed as being neutral good, it probably consists of them doing stuff like replacing your modern computer with a ZX Spectrum because
everything after Colossal Caves is garbage.
Or they might replace your speakers with a MIDI sound card because
it sounds much more authentic.
And when they aren't out there making Uncle Ted proud, they usually spend their time hidden away, assumedly surrounded by their historical relics. Or if they're a little more social, they can be found living with Luddite groups like the Amish or the St. Bride School. They may also hang out with historical reenactment groups or historical villages as their resident expert. And sometimes they run little museums revolving around that era. Also, fun fact, but apparently a group of Epokasites is called a reenactment. One thing I think is kind of funny is there isn't really a limit to how primitive the culture they can hyperfixate on is. In fact, the book mentions that they are drawn to the sense of technology of their chosen era, like the smell of ozone from early lasers, the smell of early gas engines, and the smell of forge coal. So it is possible that you could run into a caveman Epokasite. Speaking of cultures from the ancient past, there is one last group of tragic Epokasites. So some of you may know that there is a rather niche event in the Starfinder setting called the Gap, the Gap, where history just sort of got erased. So if an Epokasite latched on to, I don't know, post-industrial Absalom City, they possibly spend a lot of their time going, as they only have half-faded and muddled memories of a time that they yearn for but can't really remember. And whereas other Epokasites may have a treasure trove of trinkets, these Epokasites may have only a few odds and ends that they may not fully know the significance of, only that this thing is good. So let's talk about a few ways that you could run Epokasites in your game. The first way is that you could have them be a quest giver. For example, they have embedded themselves as a museum curator and want you to track down some old trinket in return for some
useless modern tech slot,
which turns out to be a crate of super cool prototype weaponry. Or, someone is sabotaging a local store. Sometimes it's done by new tech being swapped out for old junk right before a big important customer comes by, but by the time the police get there, everything has been returned. And on top of that, they're also having problems where product and equipment in the store just can't hold a charge. And your group is hired to figure out just what the hell's going on. Eventually the party finds out that an employee in the store is an Epokasite in disguise and is sabotaging the store because the business is coincidentally using a similar logo that a business from the Epokasite's favorite time period used, and apparently Crazy Nasir's Electronic Emporium is
ruining the good name of an honest coppersmith.
Or some such nonsense. Or, your party is going through the ruins of a long-dead civilization, and right before you get to the treasure, you're stopped by a mighty treasure guardian, who will only let you in if you can correctly answer his riddle. And the only clue you're given is that basically anyone from the civilization would know the answer to this riddle, but the culture died out centuries ago. Because of this, you may need to find an Epokasite who identifies with this time period, and even though he's giving out what he considers to be everyday knowledge, he's a fae, so after a small side quest, he tells you,
oh my, yes, everyone knows this, it's so obvious. Wait, what do you mean? Have you really never heard of Skibbity Toilet?
Hey everyone, post-editing Evan here. I thought of this while doing some chores, and I just had to put this last one in. So, the last way you could put an Epokasite in your game would be in a junkyard/spaceship pick and pull. So picture this, your last round of Starship Combat didn't go well. Or maybe the part just died. Either way, you need to replace your ship's Quantum MacGuffinizer 9000. While looking for the part, you meet an Epokasite and happen to strike up a conversation. They tell you that they like to look for artifacts of their chosen time period in places like this, and say that they saw a Quantum MacGuffinizer 9000 a few days ago. And they'd be happy to show you where it is, but they're busy checking on a lead regarding an old transport ship that was used by a local museum. However, that area is currently infested with some local wildlife, or maybe it's now the territory of a pack of vicious space hobos. So if you want to have them show you where the MacGuffinizer is, you'll need to go with them. And to end things, I want to talk about how you might want to run an Epokasite NPC. The quick and easy way to describe their personality is that they're like one of those old people who just don't get what the kids these days are doing. What with their Zenyatas and their TikToks and their Fortnites. However, if you really want to figure out how one would act, look in a mirror. Boys and girl, I unfortunately have to announce that we are Epokasites, or at the very least are becoming one. And I'm not just being hyperbolic, I actually have the data to prove it. Our high school jams are being played in the grocery store, media we grew up with is being re-released for nostalgic purposes, and stuff we bought brand new is now considered to be retro. So if you want to faithfully run an Epokasite NPC, look up or remember some old slang, like Giggle Mug, You Egg, Where's the Beef, or that old classic,
Iltam Zumra Rashupti Ilatim, Litait Belet Ishi, Rabit Igigi.
And then have them be really confused about the weird space slang that you guys made up at the table. Or you could make your party roll some history checks to fully understand what they're saying. Well everyone, that's going to wrap up this video. If you liked what you saw, please give it a like and share it with your friends. Comment down below and tell me how you would put Epokasites in your game. Subscribe and turn on the bell notification to see when new videos come out.
Hey you rascal, thank you for watching the video. Click here to subscribe, click here to see one of our newer videos, and click here to see something random.
Oh boy, now I can smell like getting shot by Biggie.